listening to The Mark Cox Show. Follow Mark on Twitter at MarkCox971.
Senator, does it give you a queasy feeling?
Yeah, it does. That was very uncomforting. And we need to get more into that. You know, that's the first time that really any discussion of any length about Loretta Lynch. And we've all heard about the runway incidents, you know, on the tarmac. But now knowing there might be a little bit more to discuss and to understand. But, you know, she had recused, and that's when I think Comey had said at that time that's when he knew he had to go it alone.
And from before this president took office to this day, it is overwhelmingly clear that there have been and continue to be those in government who are actively attempting to undermine this administration with selective and illegal leaks of classified information and privileged communications. Mr. Comey has now admitted that he is one of these leakers. Today, Mr. Comey admitted that he unilaterally and surreptitiously made unauthorized disclosures to the press of privileged communications with the president.
And welcome back to the Mark Cox Show. This is Chris Arp, substitute hosting today. And as I said before we went on break, our next guest is going to be Mark Strand with the with the Congressional Institute. Those were clips that were played from the Comey testimony. And we're going to have Mark give us his assessment of the Comey testimony. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Congressional Institute and what they do. Mark Strand, how are you?
Great, Chris. How are you? It's good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, too. Let me give a little bio for you before we get started. Mark Strand is an adjunct professor of legislative affairs at George Washington University's Graduate School of Political Management and the co-author of the book Surviving Inside Congress. He also writes a blog, The Sausage Factory, that provides an inside look at legislative strategies and procedures. Strand spent nearly 24 years on Capitol Hill in both the House and the Senate, most recently serving as chief of staff to James Talent. He served as the staff director of the House Committee on the Small Business when Talent was chairman. He was also chief of staff to Representative Bill Lowry, Stan Paris, and he's also served as a legislative director and a press secretary. Whew, that's a mouthful, Mark.
It makes me sound old.
You're not old. And a disclaimer to everyone, Mark Strand is my ex-boss when I worked for Senator Talent.
And you were our best employee.
Oh, I appreciate that. All right, Mark, I'm sure you were riveted like the rest of America watching the Comey hearings where we didn't learn very much. You are a man, I told people before you came on, you have forgotten more about Congress and politics than I will ever know, or most of us will ever know. What is your assessment of the Comey hearings from yesterday?
Well, I think probably both sides got what they wanted out of the hearing. The people who are just against Trump no matter what he does got enough to keep themselves going, and the people who support the president also heard that that the president's not under investigation and that he did not take any actions that seemed to be an obstruction of justice. And there was a little bonus for Republicans in terms of Comey revealing his conversation with the former Attorney General regarding her desire to call the investigation of the Clinton emails a matter instead of an investigation, which, again, I don't think is particularly earth-shattering, but it does show that politics is nothing new when it comes to the Justice Department.
Now, Comey admitted yesterday that he leaked his memos to spur the appointment of a special prosecutor. Do you think Comey is under any legal jeopardy? A lot of people are saying that the memos that he released were government property. What's your view, Mark?
I think that'll be kind of up in the air. Yes, he claims it was his personal memos, but I think clearly it sounds like he said he went back to his office and typed it, so he did it on federal paper and federal time, which would imply it's federal information that should have been contained. I think he certainly set himself up to be a person who was also a leaker and therefore not the solution to the problem, but part of the problem. At the same time, I mean, it should be said that, Comey is widely respected as a law enforcement officer for the most part. And so, people look at his testimony as a mixed basket. I don't think he seemed like he was angry at the president and he wanted to get even. which seemed kind of beneath his dignity in some ways, and which made the whole situation rather unfortunate. Whether he put himself into any criminal jeopardy, I probably doubt that. But it was in the area where we're very concerned about leakers, it didn't make him look any better than he looked before, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I can have a little bit of empathy with James Comey. Getting fired, watching yourself being fired on television would probably make you kind of angry, I would think.
True.
I don't know. Mark, tell us this. Tell us a little bit about the Congressional Institute, and you're the president of that, and what you guys do.
Well, for the most part, we're a nonprofit, and our job is to support Congress and help them do their jobs better. We put on retreats for member of Congress. We train staff. We try to help them do their job better. And one of the main things we're involved in is an effort to sort of launch a new round of congressional reform, mostly because I think most of us believe that the current Congress isn't working the way it should. They haven't passed the budget on time and according to law since 1995. 90% of the Congress was not serving the last time they actually completed the budget process the proper way. They don't debate often enough. The rules are too restricted. The filibuster maybe certainly has morphed into something that was not intended to be in the Senate. And they basically need a new round of reform. And the effort we're really launching right now is to push them to convene a joint committee on the reorganization of Congress, which Congress has basically done every 20 years or so.
Didn't know that.
To sort of clear the cobwebs out of the attic and get rid of some of these procedural problems they have and come up with a bipartisan and bicameral set of reforms that can be enacted to make Congress work better.
You've been on the Hill a long time, and we see the rancor between the Democrats and Republicans right now, and I really don't see how the two parties can ever come together. There's such on opposite polar extremes of everything. I always tell people that the left has taken our country so far to the left since the 60s, taking God out of school and all of that Republicans just want to try to bring it halfway back to the center. But because of that, it looks like we're complete right-wing nuts just trying to get it back to the center. What can we do in Congress to try to get these people working together?
Well, I think this is the problem, Chris. I think you point out it's certainly the worst it's ever been in the modern era. Obviously, we've had a civil war before, so we've had partisanship and polarization before. And so it's not new, but it's certainly the worst it's been in our lifetimes. And this is a big problem for democracy because democracy doesn't automatically work. It requires the willing participation of both the political majority and the political minority. And so for the Democrats to just refuse to cooperate in the legislative agenda is not healthy for the democracy. They're missing out their opportunity to influence the public, to influence debate. And we have some really important things to get done. Health care reform, whether you pass the Republican version in the House or something else, the current system is going to collapse. I think the Democrats are hoping Hillary would win and they would enact a set of reforms that they would like. She didn't, but that still means that doesn't mean the situation doesn't have to be fixed. Obamacare is going to fail on its own weight in its current situation, and they have to work together. I mean, I don't understand why they would skip the opportunity to be a part of that process. We desperately need tax reform. It's the only way we can get major job creation, better jobs, a way to increase the average income for the average working person. This requires a major tax reform. Even President Obama has said we needed corporate tax reform, so this is not a single-party initiative. Again, not participating in it means that the Democrats miss out on the opportunity to help a lot of working-class voters who have normally been part of their coalition.
We
also need infrastructure reform, and this is a golden opportunity for both parties to work together. Because obviously, there's no Republican bridges and there are no Democrat bridges. There are the bridges that need repair and the bridges that aren't. And by not participating in the process, they're leaving their constituents on the sideline. So I'm hoping that the Democrats just realize out of enlightened self-interest that they need to start, accept the results of the election.
Exactly.
That would be a good place to start. And then start working together with Republicans on behalf of their own constituents.
Mark, I think I may be a tiny bit small part of the problem when it comes to this partisanship and all that. And the reason that I say this is I printed out 2 articles today. One was from AP. And the title was "A Key Republican Demands Subsidies to Calm Insurance Markets." And then another from the roll call says Senate moderates say they are closer on health care. Now, as a partisan Republican, when I see those headlines, I get squeamish. When I see that, it's like, what do you mean you want to subsidize insurance companies? What do you mean if the moderates say they're getting closer on health care, that means it's going to be a bad bill? How do we overcome that type of thinking?
Well, the thing we have to understand is that the founders did not set up a system that ever allowed one side absolute victory unless they had such overwhelming numbers in the polls. And neither party has had a significant majority really going back to Ronald Reagan. I mean, we've been at partisan equilibrium for going on 30, 35 years. Mm-hmm. So we've kind of forgotten the fact that legislation is supposed to be a compromise. I mean, if you look at the great legislation in this country, the Civil Rights Act or Medicare, the Voting Rights Act, they were done with majorities of both parties in both chambers. Mm-hmm. And so to do anything that requires major consensus, you have to get people on both parties to participate. And so the fact that we are moving somewhat towards the middle may be uncomfortable. It's not what conservatives want, perhaps. But at the same time, it's more realistic in terms of getting something done that might last. You're going to have to get some moderate votes. The Freedom Caucus doesn't have the votes to pass anything by itself in the House. And it can't simply hold the process hostage by trying to prevent anything from happening whatsoever because they don't have the numbers to do it. And so what we basically have on health care reform, it's really, people make it sound like they're far apart. They never were. Of course, that's, always
right.
When the House passes something, the Senate says, oh, it's the worst thing since, in history, and we're going to do our own thing. And in reality, all they're doing is tinkering with what the House did. The president sends his budget up. Oh, it's dead on arrival. Of course, they use it as a benchmark for everything. I mean, part of this is the political language. But the reality is that the Republican plan in the House fixed health care by allowing the states to continue their funding on Medicaid until it phases out, but then using the money to pay for high-risk pools so that people who have pre-existing conditions will get subsidized by the state, the insurance fund, sort of like a high-risk fund, and not by other premium holders. Mm-hmm. Right now, the reason why premiums are so high is that they are having the policyholders who are healthy pay for the benefits of people with pre-existing conditions. Mm. That's making insurance unaffordable for everybody. So the Republican plan lowers those premiums by basically putting the money into just directly subsidizing the pre-existing condition.
Our ex-boss had a couple of good initiatives for healthcare. One was health savings accounts, and one was a initiative to have businesses that were in trade groups like restaurants and things of that nature that they could pull together and create an insurance pool. Where are those initiatives in the process? Are they in this bill? Or are they close to being in the bill?
Well, the House allowed for that. Since it's a reconciliation bill, they couldn't actually pass them specifically, but the provisions allow for that to happen. And so, once they get the repeal of Obamacare done and they change the financing formula, they can pass all these things. So this is what Paul Ryan talks about with his 3-bucket approach. The first one was the actual repeal of the bill and the repeal of the taxes and everything else that goes into that. Second was the regulatory reform done by Tom Price at the Department of Health and Human Services. And then the third would be the creative bills such as health savings accounts and buying insurance across state lines and associations of employees grouping together to create larger pools than you can get in the individual market. There are a lot of creative solutions out there. I mean, there's no lack of good ideas about how to improve health care. I think most people will agree that there are people who financially need some help to do this. And secondly, there are people who should be allowed to be as creative as they want to be in terms of coming up with the insurance solutions that help them.
Mark, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then finally, we should not be in a position where we're forcing anyone to buy something they don't want to buy.
Exactly.
We want everyone to have access should they choose, but we don't want to compel people to purchase products that they don't want to purchase.
Mark, where can the folks in the listening audience get more information on the Congressional Institute?
Well, you can go to our website at CONGINST.org. You'll find some interesting studies about voters in Congress, especially some studies we've done on reform in the last election. But also, even if you're interested in some of the minutiae about what's going on the congressional floor, you might find it there too. And it's good for most of us if we're suffering from insomnia, but for the rest of us, it does give you an idea of what's some of the interesting procedure that takes place in Congress.
Mark, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. We've been communicating through online media, but it's been a while since I've talked to you personally, and it's always good to talk to you, sir. And I always will appreciate the opportunity you and Jen Talent gave me to serve Senator Talent and serve the great citizens of Missouri.
Well, it's my pleasure, and you're doing great work, and you are a passionate advocate for so many causes, and it's great to follow you on Facebook and see what you're up to.
Mark, thanks you.
Chris.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
And that's Mark Strand with Congressional Institute. Good stuff, good stuff. Our next guest when we come back will be Patrick Ishmael with the Show Me Institute.
But I guess you didn't know, as I said, the story goes. Baby, now I got the flow, 'cause I know it from the start. Baby, when you broke
This
my
is the Mark
heart,
Cox Show.
that I had to come again. I'm sure you did it when your love was mine. All those times I said.
Air Comfort Service Heating and Cooling. Weather with